Here locally, rental rates have dropped by the greatest amount that we've seen in the last 3 years, but not to fear. We're here to discuss all things rentals and best practices for filling your vacancies now. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Kris German, and welcome back to the Apartment Dealer Show. Today, we're discussing all things rental rates. Now, if you've had a vacancy of late, you may have experienced that it's taking a little bit longer to fill the vacancy. Maybe there's there's fewer inquiries for the rental. And definitely that rental rates have, in terms of the growth of rental rates, it's stalled out. So what are the facts? Rental rates, while slowing, are still 22% higher than the rental rates we had in 2019. That's a good thing. So starting in 2020 and the years following, we had historic gains when it comes to rental rates, especially in those communities that I service as a realtor, my team and I service, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside counties. So when we say that rental rates are slowing, it's to no surprise because, of course, rental rates were not going to grow at double-digit figures forever. So we are still 22% higher than our rental rates that we had in 2019, but we are 4.2% lower than the highs that we experienced coming off the highest rents. So yes, rents have slipped, but they've slipped from essentially some really high rental rates. Now we're going to share a chart with you here that's going to share with you those communities that have seen the greatest losses when it comes to rental rates versus those communities that are still growing, the communities that have seen the greatest increases, because some of you may be contemplating selling something here that you own in Southern California, doing a 1031 exchange and moving your equity out of state, or maybe you're just looking to acquire something out of state, diversify a little bit more. This will give you a flavor of what's going on with the rental rates in some of the larger communities. So what is impacting rental rates to begin with? Well, easily one can point to the economy, right? Inflation. And more articles you read, the inflation that's still occurring while maybe slowing is impacting your clientele. It's impacting your tenants. They're the ones that feel the inflation the most on simple household items, gas, groceries. And this it eats away at their discretionary income. How much money is left to pay for things like rent? So the economy is definitely a stressor on rental rates. Second would be vacancy. Now, it's charted that over the course of 2024, we're going to see 1 million new apartment units added to the multifamily market. Now, that's not just here in Los Angeles. That's nationwide. But nonetheless, we're seeing tremendous growth when it comes to new construction. Now, for many of you watching this video, many of our clientele, new construction doesn't necessarily impact you and your rentals. Your property is a different asset class than the new properties that are being built. In other words, if you have a simple mom and pop, 5 to 50 unit property built sometime in the 50s or 60s, you're not competing with new construction. New construction oftentimes has ground level retail. It has amenities such as laundry service and weight rooms, and it has a pool on the roof of the apartment and on, right? So it's a different asset class. And so when we hear about new construction, it's not necessarily impacting your rentals to the degree that they potentially could. But nonetheless, we are seeing an increase in vacancy. So if it's not the new construction, what is it? Well, tenants are having a hard time financially. So potentially now tenants are staying at home longer or moving back home with their parents. They're doubling up in terms of moving in with roommates, just whatever they need to do in order to make ends meet. But we definitely have seen an increase in vacancy. Now, you may be saying, well, I haven't had a vacancy in some time. I have tenants lined up to rent from me, even if I don't have a vacancy. And so again, these things are dependent upon the community of which you own in, what your current rental rates are. It's one thing to say, well, I never have vacancies. Well, but if your rents are 20% below market, that's a problem in and of itself. But I acknowledge that for many of you, you're not really experiencing a vacancy. But here recently, even for myself in 2 separate properties that my wife and I own, we've had a vacancy at each. And kind of along the same story, because as you know, oftentimes we renovate our units. So one unit in particular, I did one showing and we found a tenant in one showing and we're getting exceptional rent there. And so we're going to fill that fairly quickly. And we'll see if the same holds true for the next vacancy that we have coming up. But it's something to be conscientious of, that vacancies are increasing. Now, even amidst the stresses that currently we're experiencing on rental rates, the bottom line is whether it's LA County, Orange County, San Bernardino County, Riverside County, it's still cheaper to rent than it is to buy. Landlords still have the upper hand when it comes to rentals. So yes, we are going through a period of time where there's increased vacancy. We are going through a period of time where we're only going to see single-digit increases when it comes to rental rates. But nonetheless, affordability is an issue when it comes to homes. And so your tenants are going to stay renters longer. Unless you own properties that are, say, maybe in B+ communities, A communities, then yes, your tenants probably are planning and scheming on how can they buy a home. They hear that interest rates are coming down. They want to take advantage. Rental rates are very high in some of these B+, A communities. And so they definitely are trying to figure out a way to purchase. But by and large, tenants will remain tenants. And so that essentially is good news if you're the housing provider. Now, if you're curious, what are the current asking rental rates in your community? If you go to raisemyrents.com, that's where you can access our free rental rate survey. Again, that's raisemyrents.com. Now, my staff and I only compile this information for those cities that we service. Upon downloading that report and the city you're interested in, you find is not there, the question not to ask is, well, why didn't Kris pull the data for this city? The real question is, why didn't your realtor, your trusted real estate advocate, do a rental rate survey for you? So we do this for the areas that we service. We do this for our personal clientele. Obviously, I cannot do this for every city in Southern California. We put it together for as many cities as we can. But those are the current asking rental rates, average rental rates as of the recording of this video. If you haven't already, I would prompt you at this time to go watch our market update video. I went through all the sales in the communities that we service that occurred over the course of 2023, compare that to 2022, and give you an update on what's the status of the market, the overall market conditions. This is not the time to discuss that. I would refer you to that video and we'll put a link here so you can access that. But so let's talk about best practices if you do happen to come across a vacancy. Number one, I definitely would put your rental on Zillow.com. There are many sites that you can put rentals on, but I have found personally that Zillow.com, because it then, once you've uploaded your vacancy to Zillow, it then exports it out to other websites. We get plenty of traffic utilizing that. It's very affordable. The general platform is free. I don't suggest leaving it as an unpaid ad. I believe it's like $29.99 to advertise your rental as of now. Definitely worth the cost. Essentially, what does that do? It just moves your rental up in the viewing window as tenants are perusing, what's available in certain areas. Now, when you list your vacancy, please ensure that you have good photos. I can't tell you how many listings that I see where there's a one-off picture of the exterior of the building and the exterior just isn't that nice. Or the first picture that a tenant sees is just a weird angle of the apartment. Typically, tenants are going to be interested in the bathroom, the kitchen, or maybe a large living room, something that's clean and unique about the property. Now, if your unit cannot offer either, then some general photos are going to have to do. But this is where it pays to have updated units. But if I was you, the first picture that they would see is going to be the kitchen. It's going to be the bathroom. That picture is going to be well lit. So again, open the shutters, turn on the lights as you're shooting these photos, and have plenty of photos for the tenant to peruse. Nowadays, people want to do everything from their mobile device. They want to do as much homework as they can before visiting the site. The more photos you have to tell the story, the better. So it increases the likelihood that they'll inquire about your unit. Next, the description. And I'll share a description here that I recently used for one of my rentals, but essentially notate what's different about your property, what's the highlights, what's the amenities, how to contact you, what's the current asking rental rate. Make it sound enthusiastic, make it sound like everyone should be interested in this unit. But put some thought, put some energy into this. You could even just take the few bullet points that there is about your unit, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, amenities. Use something like ChatGPT, which is free nowadays, if there's a free version, and plug it in there and just use the prompt of please utilize these bullets to write a listing for a vacant apartment building that will be listed on Zillow. And you'd be surprised that the AI will then generate something that you can use if you're not comfortable writing the description for yourself, but be very conscientious of a good description, not just 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, asking rent, call Jim. Could work. I'm just telling you again, tenants, the ideal client base that's out there wants to do their homework up front, especially those that are using something like Zillow and they have the app on their phone and they're scrolling. You want a good description. Next, I would tell you, do not accept applications through Zillow. It's great to list the property, but there's a feature there. It's going to ask you, do you want to accept applications? My opinion, no, you do not. The way that I give applications out is I have to meet you, shake your hand at the rental unit itself. I rent my own vacancies. So again, this is something I have the real day-to-day experience of doing these things as a landlord. And I prefer to hand out the applications at the unit. Why? One, they have to make effort. Do you know how easy it is for tenants to just fill out one general application through Zillow and fire it off to 30 different rentals? You don't know how serious these folks are. That's the first problem. Second, I want to meet you. I want to shake your hand. I want to put a name to the face. And so I want you to use some energy to come to our viewing, and I'll explain how we do the viewings here in a second. And then you get to take an application with you. This has always worked. I've done it this way for a number of years. That's just how I prefer to hand out the paper applications, and then they can send it to me through email. They can send it to me through fax. And then once we intake that documentation, if it meets the qualifications, then we would move on to something like a credit check. Now, credit check, background check. I would suggest you use a site like rentspree.com. That's what I use for my rentals. Again, this is exactly what Kris uses in my business here, my rental business. Rentspree.com. The tenant pays, as of today, I think it's about $39.99 is what the tenant pays. Or you can choose to pay. It does give you an option of who's going to pay, you or the tenant. You simply put either the tenant's email or their cell phone number into the system, send. It's going to send them a request. Everything else from that point is done for you. Rentspree.com takes payment from the tenant. They generate the credit report and the background check report and the eviction report. They're going to email that to the tenant. You're going to get a copy because you're the one who's created the login. And now both of you have a copy and it's all there for you. They've pulled the credit. They've done the criminal background check and you have the eviction history. For me, I just found that that is the best tool to use for the background check. Now, as you begin to receive inquiries through Zillow, and I'll tell you, if you got the good photos, you got the good description, your rental rate is in line because you went to raisemyrents.com, you figured out what the asking rent is today, you have all that dialed in, you're going to get several inquiries. Are they all real? Not really. Because on the other side of the app, the prospective tenant for multiple units can just hit interested. Very easy for them to do, okay? So don't think like, oh gosh, I got 75 inquiries, they're all gonna potentially rent from me. You're gonna find that maybe 20% of the inquiries actually will show up to a viewing. That's generally about the average. So what do we want to do? We want to put a little bit of legwork here. In the Zillow system, as you see the inquiries, you can respond through Zillow, which I do, and that response is going to discuss the next showing of the property. So let's discuss, well, how does Kris show his rentals? I like to do it in an open house format. I do not schedule appointments because lo and behold, people will not show, they'll cancel. I do not have the time between my real estate business and my family life to be running back and forth to my properties to show the unit to one person, to two people. So what do? I schedule a showing Saturday mornings from 10 to 12, and it's an open showing. I let them know that they can arrive anytime between 10 to 12. Do not assign times, okay? Why not? Because you want to create desirability. You want to create kind of like a competitive bid for the unit. So the more people that show up at the same time and they have to wait in line, and they will, trust me, they begin to think to themselves, well, gosh, this many people like it. How many applications are they going to get? Maybe I really should submit my application today. That's what you want. So I have a showing Saturday mornings, 10 to 12. If that doesn't get the job done, we don't get the right applicant from that initial showing, then I'm going to have another showing either Tuesday or Wednesday evening from 6 to 7:30. And again, it's an open showing. It's 6 to 7:30 because typically people are off work by then. And then I keep alternating Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Saturday, and then until we get the unit filled. Now, does that day and time, or do those day and times work for everyone? No. Are you going to get requests of, well, can you please show up on Monday at noon and Wednesday at 2? Sure. I don't find that to be a good use of time. No matter if the tenant says, you know what, I have great credit, I'm ready to move in now, I'll give you first month's, last month's, the next month, all this stuff. And that's changed here in California. You can't even ask for more than 1 month security deposit if you watched our recent video with Mike Brennan and the new laws here in California when it comes to security deposits. Anyways, that's a side note. But here's the point. I don't find it a good use of time to just schedule those one-off appointments. I'm not telling you what to do here. I'm just trying to say, look, I'm looking for efficiency. I'm looking to maximize my time at the property. I'm looking to find the best qualified tenant. I'm looking to get maximum rent. These are the tactics that I have found that lead to exactly that. So Zillow, we've got a good listing. We have a good description. We're going to reply to tenants through the Zillow, either computer app or your phone app. Now, the computer version is much easier to communicate with the tenants. That's what I have found. And so then you simply reply to their inquiry that our next showing will be, say, this Saturday from 10 to 12. You're free to arrive anytime between then. We hand out applications at the property in person. Any questions, please text Kris, and then I would give my cell phone number, and then they can communicate with me like that. If you want to go a step further, and I do, you'll notice that on the right-hand side here of the computer screen, of the site, I should say, that it says call. There's a button there where you can actually click it as if you were going to call the tenant. It pulls up their cell phone number. What it's showing you there is the tenant's cell phone number. One, you could call. I wouldn't do that. That's going to take a lot of time because you're going to have a lot of inquiries. And again, 2/3 of these inquiries are not going to be real. But I definitely would send a text message directly from my phone. So I have created a text message, right, that I can keep copying and pasting with that also has a link to the Zillow ad. Okay. So this takes just a little bit of work, but I copy and paste the link that you would find in the mobile app to my listing. I also have typed out the same response that I'm sending through Zillow, the website, and I'm going to text it to each of those individuals that have inquired. Between the two, the tenants are getting the impression that, wow, this landlord is Johnny on the spot, right? They're responsive, they're engaged, and they're getting good information. Second, I'm just trying to cut down on the amount of no-shows, and I'm trying to get as many people as I can to one of these showings so that, again, I can have a line of people because it's going to create that emotional need of, well, I better apply soon or else that unit will be taken, assuming that they're interested in the unit. There's some other simple things that I'll mention here. Smell. There should not be any off-putting odors in the unit. So if for whatever reason there is, maybe from the leftover tenant or God knows what, hey, burn some candles, use some Glade plugins. I don't care what you got to do, Febreze, but you need to make sure that unit is thoroughly clean. I would not show the unit, pre-fully being done, painted and everything. I would just be patient. Show it when it's completely done. You're going to get two different types of tenants. I want somebody that's going to appreciate the cleanliness of the unit, assuming that they're going to carry that same quality forward. So we want to make sure that it smells well, that it's well lit. Get there before the tenants arrive. Open up all the shades. Open up the windows. Let's let the unit breathe, because oftentimes when it's been closed up, that can create off-putting odors, or even just the smell of fresh paint. People don't really necessarily want that either. So let's get it all opened up, lights on before anyone arrives. Maybe we give it once over with the mop and some Pine Sol, just again to give it a good smell, so that when people come in, the unit is very presentable. These are just some small items. I'm sure that, again, these are the things that you're doing in your day-to-day practices. Now, let's say even amidst your best efforts, you cannot get this rental filled. Well, now we need to begin to consider concessions. And when we talk about concessions, I would not do something like no security deposit needed. Now, I think that's a bad idea. I wouldn't even do first month's rent free. I think that's a bad idea. I'd rather see you do one of two things. One, offer a bonus to one of your existing tenants on site or one of your other properties, that if they refer a good tenant who's qualified and you end up accepting them, they get a bonus, and that's going to create another happy tenant for you. And nothing works best like a referral. You might want to consider that. Or you offer to a new prospective tenant that after 6 months of timely, consecutive monthly rental payments, they get a reduction of rent, say on the 7th month, or they get some sort of bonus. That's the type of concession that I think I would offer. Unless the rental market were to get more dire, then maybe you need to offer something that's a little bit more extreme. But I would say maybe run one of those two ideas. And when I say offer one of your other tenants at maybe another property that you own that's not the exact location, all you would have to do is create a one-page flyer about your rental with some pictures, description, and give them a few and say, hey, look, I have a rental over at my place on such and such street. If you know someone good and if I rent to them, I'm going to give you, say, $300 off next month's rent. So I wouldn't do $25, $50, because again, this is cheaper if you do $300 than telling somebody half a month's rent, this sort of thing. Really incentivize people to work on your behalf, get all these tenants, talking about your vacancy. I think that is a winning idea. And lastly, I'll say, bottom line, raise your rents. Do we need to be cognizant about what our current rental rates are relative to market rate? Yes, that's why our rental survey is very handy. In other words, if right now, as I mentioned, there's some stress on the rental market and your unit is nearly, the current tenant is nearly at rental rate, do we really want to give them the maximum rental increase? Probably not. Not right now, especially if their rental rate is essentially at market. To squeeze out another few dollars only to have that person vacate. So now potentially you're going to have a vacant unit, some cleanup and the expense of that. So how do I determine this? How much are the current tenants paying relative to market? Oftentimes our tenants are paying above market because we're renting out units that have been fully rehabbed. So, that's one thing that goes into our consideration. But just be cognizant. What is the current rental rate? What's the relative market rent? And maybe I increase it, but not to the extent that I could, regardless of what percentage is available in the community that you own. The other thing that we need to be cognizant of is there's going to be a new rent control bill proposed on the California ballot November of 2024. And the most alarming component of this proposed bill is that there would be vacancy control, meaning if you have a unit that becomes vacant, see right now under statewide rent control, or any rent control here in California, even the various cities that have all their crazy, different ordinances. Nonetheless, if you get a vacancy, then you're free to choose what you charge the next tenant. And that's the way it should be, right? Private ownership rights and so forth. But this new bill that'll be up for a vote in November actually will have vacancy control. A third party telling you, well, how much is it that you can rent your vacancy for? One thing to keep in mind is you and I, those of us who live in California, we voted on rent control in 2018 and we defeated it. Rent control went down as a no vote. Well, guess what? In 2019, the politicians said, we know better than you, as oftentimes they do, and they still passed rent control. So even if we defeat this bill, which I'm optimistic we will because it's so crazy, this November, not to say they won't pass some version of it on their own accord, they being the legislatures, or it won't come back again another couple of years, reborn, under a new name and so forth. So you want to stay on top of your rental rates. I'm not saying don't raise your rental rates. I'm saying be cognizant. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. If you're getting market or above market, maybe we contemplate not such a high of a rental increase. But of course, we increase our rental rates, especially for those of you that are well behind the market. Many cities now have their own ordinances. And if your city doesn't have it, do not tell yourself, oh, it won't happen here. There's plenty of cities that I could name that opposed to statewide rent control. Statewide rent control has a 10% ceiling. There's some cities that have a 3% ceiling or the change in CPI, the change in inflation, whichever is less. What does that mean? Well, if you have a 3% ceiling and CPI, let's say the change in inflation is 1%. So the laws ran 3% ceiling or the change in CPI, whichever is lower, guess what? You get to raise your rent 1% that year. There's several cities that have a version of that. So even if it's not where you own, it soon could be coming to you. That's why we need to stay on top of our rental increases. I hope you have found today's video informative, helpful. Please give the video a like. That's how I get this content into the hands of as many landlords as I can. I'm trying to spread the word. What are the best practices when it comes to California rentals, when it comes to being a landlord, when it comes to building your financial legacy in multifamily properties? You can help me do that by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, turning on alerts, share a comment here with us. Let's engage. Let's get the conversation going. How can the apartment dealer best serve you? And until next time, this is Kris German, the apartment dealer, wishing you positive cash flow, tenants who behave, and much protection from Uncle Sam. Till next time.